Hi everyone. It's the end of week 4 as I'm recording this, and most of you will probably be listening to it during week 5. So for me, this semester feels like it's just flying by. I hope that everything's going well for you and that your classes are all going smoothly. So we'll start with just a couple of announcements. I've just finished looking at your work from week 3 on sea level rise and Elizabeth Rush. Thank you so much for so many good assignments and good participation on the discussion forums. For some of you, it seems like you learned for the first time that sea level rise really is a problem that's happening right now. It's not something just in the future. On the other hand, others of you who come from the coast or who have family members out there are already all too aware that it's happening because it's affecting the properties of people who you know, people who you're close to. So the next event involving Elizabeth Rush will be the live stream on February 24th at 4 p.m. And I've posted a link to the live stream on As You Learn, and I hope that many of you will be able to attend the live stream at that time and give her an audience in real time. So far, they've always been providing recordings of the live streams afterwards, so I'm assuming that they'll probably do that again this time. And if you're not able to attend on February 24th, most likely you'll be able to watch it afterwards if you need to. If you liked her writing style in the book, as many of you did, I think you'll also really enjoy hearing her speak. She's very engaging, she interacts with students really well, and she'll be talking with first-year App State students in this live stream, so it should be something that you can relate to. Okay, then one more quick announcement about week 3. I realized that on the extra credit quiz I posted, I forgot to change the settings so that you could take it multiple times if you needed to. I've gone back and fixed that. I apologize for the glitch. With the extra credit quizzes, I don't want there to be time pressure. I want you to be able to do it for as long as you need to, take it as many times as you need to get a perfect score so that you know that you've learned all the material if you're taking the trouble to do those little quizzes. Okay, then work for week 5 and week 6. These are weeks with a lot going on in my class, so I want to just reassure you that this shouldn't have to be too burdensome and kind of give you some tips for how to get through these 2 weeks. So you'll get your take-home exam for Unit 1. I'll probably post that on Tuesday or Wednesday of week 5, so probably right around when many of you are listening to this recording. And you'll have about a week to get that done. You can have extensions on the test if you need them, but let me know as soon as possible if you're going to ask for an extension. I recommend that you get this done on time if you can, because the further away we get from Unit 1, the more that you'll start to forget the material and it gets harder to complete it. Remember that the test is, obviously it's take home, everything's at home, isn't it? But it's open book. You can use any materials from the class. You can look up things online. And it's collaborative. I encourage you to reach out to anyone who you already know in the class. If you want to meet new people, use the exam as a chance to discuss material, discuss the questions, work on it together. Okay, then in addition to the test, you do have a regular assignment due for week 5, that's assignment 5, and for week 6, which is assignment 6. So that may sound like a lot, but remember that your lowest assignment grade gets dropped for each unit. So in Unit 1, if you've already done assignments 1 through 4 and you're happy with your grade, you do have the option to simply skip assignment 5. You just take a 0 on that. That becomes your lowest assignment grade for the unit. It gets dropped. It never hurts your final grade. So if you're worried about completing assignment 5 and the test in the same week, know that you can skip the assignment if you've already done 1 through 4. And in a real pinch, you can also do assignment 5 or assignment 6 later on in the semester. It's okay to complete those after the deadline if you're really in a tight spot for time. Excuse me. Then I'm going to make the interaction for this week really simple and really easy, because I know that you've got the test to take, and I do hope you interact with each other as you're taking the test. So I'm simply going to ask you in the interaction for your feedback on what the group interactions have been like for you. If there is some of the weekly formats that you've enjoyed more than others, do you prefer the discussion forums? Do you like Flipgrid? Are there other discussion formats that you'd like to try within your small groups? I am planning to keep you in the same small group for the entire semester so that you can kind of get used to the same people and get to know each other in more depth. But let me know how those are going for you. This is the first time that I've offered this as a 100% online class, so I really want to know whether you feel like you're getting to know each other and having the interactions that you want to have for the course. And I'm now going to dive into a bit of a lecture for week 5 material. And the lecture is going to be slightly longer than usual, but the reason for that is that I know that some of you will choose to skip assignment 5. And on the syllabus, in addition to the 2 articles that are for assignment 5, which are the Pyron and the Safina articles, the syllabus also says that you'll read a 3rd article relating to the pandemic. And I'm going to make that optional, so in case you feel swamped with too much work, you don't have to actually read the 3rd article. But I'm going to summarize the key take-home points of articles about the pandemic in this lecture. So there won't be anything on exam 1 from the 3 articles unless it's in this lecture, but there will be things on the exam from the lecture that I'm about to give here. So also know that when I put up the exam, I'll also give you all of these lectures, not just in the YouTube format, but also as PowerPoint slides so that you don't have to sit there and like listen to the YouTube lecture over and over and over again to find what you need to find. You'll be able to just click through the slides if that's more convenient for you. Okay, so the topic of the lecture begins with biodiversity. What is biodiversity? So those of you who are taking Gen Ed biology may have already discussed this, or you will later in the semester. Biodiversity, in this definition from a widely used undergraduate textbook, this definition divides biodiversity into 3 levels: genetic, species, and ecosystem. So genetic diversity is the amount of variation that exists within a species. So in a single given species, like differences between individuals, for example. And this aspect of biodiversity is essential for populations to adapt to changing conditions. Then the next level, species diversity, accounts for the number of species that occupy the biosphere. So when you hear about biodiversity in the news and talk about just how many species might be going extinct right now, that has a lot to do with this aspect of biodiversity, wanting to have lots and lots and lots of different species across the planet. Then the 3rd level on which we can talk about biodiversity is the variety of ecosystems on Earth, examples of which could be deserts, rainforests, grasslands, and mountaintops. Okay, so back to the rainforests that we've talked about in previous weeks. The Amazon, again, the world's largest tropical rainforest, over 2 million square miles, and mostly in Brazil, but also in several other nations. So this big green area here is roughly the Amazon rainforest. Here's the Amazon River, and here's Brazil, this big country here. And you see the other countries around the edges that also have, I should say around the edges, but these other countries also have part of the Amazon in them. So the Amazon is incredibly biodiverse. As far as we know, it contains approximately 1 in 10 known species on the planet. That's a huge number. Here's just one fun example of an animal that you might not have heard of here in the United States, a tapir, this large mammal here. And the tapir is a great example of what we call a seed disperser. And seed disperser means that it helps to spread the seeds of plants around so that plants can spring up in lots of different places and have the best chances of survival. So say that your tapir eats a piece of fruit that's fallen from a tree. that fruit passes through its digestive system. Then when the tapir poops out the excrement on the other end and that falls down into the soil, the seed is distributed to a new place, and the seed can germinate and grow wherever the tapir has taken it to. And sometimes there are even like chemicals within the digestive system of the animal that help to break down the hard coat on the outside of the seed and facilitate the germination process. So, the interplays between animals and trees and plants and forests are fascinating. And you can see that if the tapir, for example, were to go extinct or be greatly reduced in numbers, then that has a huge impact on the trees as well, because its role as a seed disperser is lost. Now, we haven't talked yet about the Congo rainforest, but it's incredibly important. The Congo is the second largest tropical rainforest on the planet after the Amazon. The Congo is roughly in this kind of square area here. There's a Congo River, just like the Amazon rainforest is along the Amazon River, the Congo rainforest is along the Congo River. And conveniently for locating it on a map, a couple of the countries that the Congo is located in actually have the word Congo in the name of the country. So the Democratic Republic of Congo here, Republic of Congo here. And there are also important tropical rainforests in West African countries along this coast here. And interestingly, a huge amount of the world's chocolate production, if you like chocolate, originates in these countries here. If you're at the grocery store and buy a, just a regular piece of a chocolate bar or what have you, pretty good chance that the cocoa originated in one of these African countries. And I've had a couple of students write really fascinating final research projects on the chocolate industry and as it relates to these West African forests, which is a very fascinating topic. Unfortunately, chocolate production does cause quite a bit of deforestation. And a couple more animals, just to kind of whet your appetite for learning more about them. This one here is what's called a forest elephant. We often think of African elephants as the really big elephants that are out on the open savannas, but the forest elephants are a little bit smaller, and they actually do live underneath the forest canopy. This one actually looks like it's walking around on the edge of a forest because it's not actually in a forest, but it is a forest elephant and does spend part of its time in the forest. So forest elephants are also seed dispersers, kind of like the tapirs, and they do things like by regularly traveling along the same routes, they actually trample down paths that look like roads that human beings can use as well. So the forest elephants do quite a bit to shape the forest environment. And then mountain gorillas, a very famous species that's been threatened in the past and in the news quite a bit, a really fascinating type of primate. Okay, so now we're coming to the area of the world that has the world's third largest rainforests, and this is Southeast Asia. And this is kind of an older map, but I like it because it specifically shows different forest types of Southeast Asia. So countries that you've probably heard of include Indonesia, Malaysia, for example. You can look at the other places on your own. And two well-known animal species from this area that are unfortunately threatened, the Sumatran orangutan and the Sumatran tiger. One of the biggest threats to animals and biodiversity in Southeast Asia and other world rainforests as well is the industry that's called the palm oil industry. And some of you may have heard of palm oil. Basically, every single one of us today has used whatever day you're listening to this on, you've probably used multiple products that contain palm oil. It's become an absolutely enormous industry worldwide. So palm oil is used in things like lotions, face lotions, lip balms, all kinds of cosmetics. It's also found in foods, sometimes foods that need to be very spreadable or sort of creamy. Things like ice cream, for example, often has palm oil in it. And palm oil is popular because it's considered to be a bit healthier than trans fats. It also keeps really well. It doesn't spoil easily. So, I can't even tell you how many billions of dollars annually are invested in this industry, but there's tons of money in it. And the problem for forests is that you see here that this is the fruit of the oil palm tree that palm oil comes from. And unfortunately, this tree grows really well in exactly the same conditions that tropical rainforests grow in. So if someone decides to put in a lucrative palm oil plantation like this one, you can see that it's all just the one kind of tree, it's all just the oil palm, and most likely this huge field here has displaced a natural tropical rainforest that had much greater biodiversity. And when we've met in face-to-face classes, I've shown little videos about just how many products use palm oil and talk with students a little bit about, should this kind of thing affect our personal habits? Are there ways to choose products that use palm oil that's harvested more sustainably, at least without causing additional deforestation? So that's a big issue that's out there. It's been a popular topic for student final research projects in the past. If anyone wants to work on the palm oil industry and deforestation for your final projects, you can certainly do more with that. Okay, and now coming back to something that we touched on last week when we talked about Australia and its fires, islands and endemic species. So islands are really good for biodiversity because oftentimes a lot of very unique species evolve on islands. So again, if a species is endemic to a location, that means that it's only found naturally in that one place and not anywhere else. Islands tend to have many endemic species that evolved over a long time span while water cut the island off from other places. We talked about Australia before. Another famous example of an island is Madagascar. So here's Africa. Here's Madagascar, which is a large island off the coast of Africa right there. And Madagascar is famous for amazing biodiversity, which unfortunately is seriously threatened by climate change and human development. Madagascar is well known for its many species of lemurs, what are called lemurs. They're really, really cute. And I've had a couple of students do final papers on lemurs. If any of you want to explore a really fascinating animal, you can do your final project on lemurs as well. Okay, so that's just an overview of how tropical rainforests in particular harbor a lot of biodiversity, but of course it's not only tropical rainforests that do. Many other natural ecosystems are really important for preserving all kinds of biodiversity. So what's happening right now with all that we hear in the news about loss of biodiversity, growing numbers of extinctions of species? Are we in what might be called the Earth's sixth mass extinction? Okay, so what do we mean by sixth mass extinction? So that implies that there have already been 5 other mass extinctions. Let's look at what those were. So scientists who study the very, very, very distant past have identified 5 general moments in the planet's history when a lot of species have gone extinct. And I won't go too deeply into all of the details, but if you want to follow the link to the article that this chart comes from, it's a really good article that summarizes these 5 extinctions. So the most distant one in time, 443 million years ago, 85% of species lost. Then after that, 359 million years ago, 75% of species lost. 252 million years ago, 96% of marine species, 70% of land species lost. 200 million years ago, 80% of species lost. 66 million years ago, 76% of species lost. And here along this column are some of the reasons why this likely happened: glacial cycles, sea level, ocean chemistry, atmospheric chemistry, climate, oceanic oxygen levels, volcanic activity, asteroid impact. Okay, so the take-home message here is that it may be true that humans right now are causing changes to the planet that could cause a similar level of extinctions among other species. Now, has this happened before? Yes, it has. It's happened several times before on the planet. It hasn't happened before while we've been around, and the extinctions that we seem to be causing right now are also happening faster than many of these other mass extinctions did in the past. But it's always interesting to view these things over the very, very long time span. Okay, so let's say that hypothetically we are causing a sixth mass extinction right now. Does it matter? How much does it matter? Why does it matter? So this brings us to assignment 5, for those of you who will do assignment 5. A few years back, a man named Pyron published a very controversial newspaper op-ed with the title, "We don't need to save endangered species. Extinction is part of evolution. The only creatures we should go out of our way to protect are Homo sapiens." So, obviously this caused a lot of controversy among people who think that it's important to protect lots of other species on the planet as well. And one person who published a response to Pyron was Carl Safina, in defense of biodiversity, why protecting species from extinction matters. So for those of you who do assignment 5, you'll identify several arguments that Pyron makes. You'll discuss Safina's rebuttal to Pyron, and then you'll tell me what your own opinion is on the topic. So just to give kind of a taste of the flavor of this debate, Pyron will say things like, the only reason we should conserve biodiversity is for ourselves. And then Safina will say no. Pyron's statement makes little practical sense because reducing the diversity and abundance of the living world will rob human generations of choices as values change. Our descendants will either revile or revere us for what we do while we have the planet's reins in our hands for a few minutes. We are each newly arrived and temporary tourists on this planet, yet we find ourselves custodians of the world for all people yet unborn. And I won't say more about them because I'd like for those of you doing this assignment to delve further into their arguments on your own. But I will use one more controversial quote from Pyron as a way to pivot us into the question of the pandemic and disease. So Pyron makes the argument that biodiversity can actually be bad for us because pathogens and various disease organisms are abundant on the planet and certainly count as a certain type of biodiversity. So Pyron says conserving biodiversity should not be an end in itself. Diversity can even be hazardous to human health. Infectious diseases are most prevalent and virulent in the most diverse tropical areas. Nobody donates to campaigns to save HIV, Ebola, malaria, dengue, and yellow fever. But these are key components of microbial biodiversity, as unique as pandas, elephants, and orangutans, all of which are ostensibly endangered thanks to human interference. So, is some biodiversity good for us and other biodiversity bad for us? Is all biodiversity important to us as long as we treat it right? So many other experts, in contradiction to Pyron, do believe that by protecting biodiversity, we ultimately protect ourselves from all kinds of things, including diseases. So if you want to read one of the optional articles that I posted on As You Learn, this one by John Vidal is really good. Destruction of habitat and loss of biodiversity are creating the perfect conditions for diseases like COVID-19 to emerge. So how does deforestation lead to human disease? This is what Vidal talks about in his article, which you can read if you want more details, but I'll just give you take-home points for now. So basically, deforestation leads to unhealthy contact with wildlife, which definitely counts as biodiversity, but we've never been in such close contact with this wildlife before. And bats and other types of wildlife often do carry viruses that are potentially dangerous to us. So when human beings engage in activities like road building, mining, and logging deep within wild forests, this brings us into closer contact with wildlife and exposes us to viruses that don't hurt that wildlife, but that might hurt us. And then when people sell wildlife in markets, which is commonplace in certain countries, especially in Asia and Africa, those markets may expose people to viruses through the wildlife. In addition, imagine a forest that's partially chopped down. What's left of the forest is smaller. So the wildlife from the original forest area now has to crowd together into a smaller space, and it's just like human beings who need to social distance. When wildlife gets too crowded together, diseases will spread more quickly and more easily. So here's a few examples of diseases that can spread through deforestation. And interestingly, one of them is relevant to our area here in Boone, and that's Lyme disease. I'm sure that many of you know that Lyme disease, which is a very serious illness, especially if it's not detected early, is spread through ticks that are carried by deer. There is Lyme disease here in Boone. If you're not careful and you pick up a tick around here, you can catch Lyme disease. So just as a side note, whenever you come back from a hike, it's a good idea to check yourself over to be sure that you don't have a tick on your skin somewhere. It's a good idea to always take a shower in the evening if you've gone on a hike, and you just wash yourself off really thoroughly so that in case there's a tick on you, you get it off. I've definitely found ticks on myself multiple times from being outdoors around here. Although to my knowledge, I've never, thankfully never contracted Lyme disease. So basic vocabulary word, a zoonotic disease is a disease that spreads from animals to humans. Okay, another recommended article, if you happen to be interested in bats. Bats are known for carrying lots and lots and lots of types of viruses that can cause diseases in human beings. And this article starts off with a story about a village in South America where people heard that bats can spread COVID-19 and then went out and tried to literally destroy a local bat population, even though, as it turned out, that population was definitely not carrying COVID. So the article makes a strong argument that bats are really critical for ecosystems, and that the problem with bats and disease is not the bats themselves, but the fact that when we cut down forests and cause disruptions to natural ecosystems, that viruses that would otherwise not enter our path and not harm us can end up causing trouble. Okay, so early on in the pandemic, a theory emerged that maybe the coronavirus that causes COVID-19 originated with wild bats and then spread to human beings via an intermediary wild animal, for example, a forest animal like pangolins that are sold in Asian markets. So this kind of possible transmission route remains a possibility, but to my knowledge, it hasn't been proven yet whether or not this was the case that happened. So the picture in the background here is a pangolin, and I've seen the pangolin described as the most interesting animal that you've never heard of. And I think that that's about right, because pangolins are totally fascinating. But in the United States, we often haven't heard of them because they're not native to here and we don't tend to use pangolin products. But amazing fact, pangolins are the #1 illegally trafficked animal around the world. It's a very lucrative trade. The scales of pangolins, the hard scales on the outside of their bodies, are believed by some people to have medicinal value, especially in Asia. The scales are very precious for people who believe that they can cure different diseases. My understanding is that the substance is basically the same substance that our fingernails are made out of, so there's no proof whatsoever that pangolin scales actually do cure diseases, but a lot of people still believe that. And then the meat is also considered a delicacy. So the illegal trafficking of pangolins is too bad, not only because it's possible that they might have been an intermediary for spreading COVID-19, but also because pangolins in their natural forest ecosystems are really important, a really important species for protecting trees, important for food chains, and so on. So I posted one small link about pangolins on AsciiLearn if you want to learn more about them. And again, if you're curious about the animal for its own sake or its possible role in the pandemic, this is a great final research paper topic for somebody. So pangolins eat things like termites and ants. And you may be aware that termites can be very destructive to wood. If you happen to live in a wood house, the last thing you want is termites because they can destroy your house. And a termite population that gets out of control can be devastating to trees in a forest. So the fact that pangolins eat termites helps to protect trees. And then as pangolins dig for ants and termites, this helps to mix and aerate the soil, so they also have a beneficial effect on soils. There are 8 species of pangolin worldwide, and they're found in Africa and in Asia. So again, just if you want to follow up on this by clicking on that As You Learn link and learning more about pangolins, they're kind of an amazing animal. And again, the #1 illegally trafficked animal in the world, which in its native ecosystem is really important for forests. Okay, so this is the end of my mini lecture on animals and biodiversity and the pandemic. And for those of you who get a chance to look at some of these articles, I hope that you find them interesting. And I'll be back in touch with you, especially as we get towards the exam on Unit 1. But just please reach out to me with an email if you have any questions about anything from this unit or moving into the unit to come. Okay, I'll be back in touch with you soon. Bye-bye.